Good day, sir. How are you? Huh?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm fine. Am I speaking to Mr. O or Mr. Stonebreaker?
Mr. Stonebreaker.
Oh, Mr. Stonebreaker. Or should I say Bracker?
What's that?
Should I say Stone? No, it's not Stonebreaker, is it?
Yeah, Stonebreaker, like breaker of stones.
Ah, indeed. Okay, well, very good, Mr.
Yeah,
Stonebreaker.
except brakes on a car.
All good. Thank you very much, sir.
You're welcome.
So is everyone going to be online? Is that the idea?
Yep, yeah, everybody should be rolling in here. We've had pretty good participants the last few weeks. So we should have about 30 or 40. And as far as I know, Mark should be on here to introduce you and we'll go from there.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Good. So let's see what have I got? Ah, okay.
Hello,
Hey.
Jack here.
Oh, you got it, huh?
Yeah, got it.
Okay.
So Sophia will come to here to pick it up, I think Monday.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'll hold on to it for you.
Thank you. Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
Just saying hello, Dr. Lacasse.
Is that you, Don? Don!
Hello.
I didn't expect to see you here, but thank you very much. That's very good of you.
I'm very, very interested, as is everybody else online, to hear what you have to say. Really important topic.
Well, it's not an unimportant topic, I agree. And I was looking at the literature today and there's quite a bit of literature that's been written on this topic recently. We know that there will be, geez, I should have mentioned that. There's conferences that are going to be held, not particularly on this topic, but we'll have sessions that will be put aside to help address this topic and listen to people who have been researching this, and I'll mention a couple of those coming up. So, and which are involved, of course, and which are also CIB sponsored events. So,
excellent news. Hopefully we've successfully promoted those to the wider membership.
It's how shall I say, we have done our very best, albeit these days the secretariat being the way it is, it's always a challenge. So and I expect everyone is doing their level best to make sure that the message gets out.
Yes, well, we're full capability now, so yes, you don't be afraid to push for better service if that's what it takes.
Oh, okay, I shall get on to it, sir.
Anyway, I'll get out of your way, Michael, and I'll talk to you next week, no doubt.
Oh, excellent, Don. Yeah, looking forward to it. Thanks so much. A real pleasure. Just to put everyone in the know who might be listening, that was Don Ward, and the Dr. Ward is CEO of the Chief Executive Officer of the CIB, the International Council for Research and Innovation in Building and Construction, and the group that's sponsoring this talk today. And of course, the president of the CIB is your very own from Purdue University. So we're doing okay. We're doing okay, Mrs. Stonebreaker. Mark, that's right.
How are you?
I was going to say the president himself. Fantastic, and a real pleasure. Here's a smiling face, come all the way with Dawn from India, and I was following your travels and looking, and it was not fooling around over there. Let me tell you, there were a lot of meetings going on. I hope you felt it was a successful trip. It certainly looked very tiring as it did.
I think it was very successful, and yes, it was quite tiring because, you know, as you said, we were just back to back 2-3 meetings every day, but very productive indeed.
Pleased to hear that.
Yeah, and thanks for following it, because that was indeed good.
Well, yeah, no, I don't know that in the past we've had such a close connection with that country, and this is a very positive thing. So, given the number of institutions that could potentially support and be supported by the CIB, so
yeah, absolutely. And there's so much research going on in that in India. It's amazing. And it was surprising that we didn't have any members from there. So this was really good.
Yeah, exactly. So very strange indeed. But well, you understand the history of CIB, and it's I should say it's where it's focused in the past. Certainly, going forward, it's been a very positive thing to reach out to many others around the globe that might find benefit from participating in CIB activities. And of course,
indeed.
Today I have a small opportunity to address the group here at Purdue, a topic that might be of interest to them, or something that they might have interest in participating in within the confines of CIB going forward. And I noticed that there are any number of people from different backgrounds and perhaps different countries that are online here, and that's all very positive.
So I will, it's just about time. Let's give another minute or so as
Sure.
people log in. And then I'll make a quick introduction and then I'll hand it over to you.
Okay, thanks very much.
Thanks. Yeah, we just, it's been already 3 days that we got back. And already the jet lag seems to be ebbing a little bit.
Well, of
But not
course,
very much.
isn't that, you're not allowed to travel, by the way, right? And you can't forget that you've got all of this other things that are pending your attention just as soon as you get back. So yes, you're not allowed to travel, you know that.
That's right.
Yeah, it's like you have to spend extra time before you travel, and then when you come back, it's like you're never out of the sauce, the deep
Yeah.
water. So, but you look, as I look at your face, I can see that you're a very happy guy, and so that suggests that you've had a very successful trip. So I'm very pleased.
We sure did. We sure did. Yeah, we sure did.
Of course,
Well, I
traveling with Don is always a plus, I'm sure, because he's
You bet. You bet. No, he's a very good traveler.
he's a very good guy indeed. Look at see his positive disposition.
You're always very entertaining, Michael Lacasse.
Nah,
Yeah.
all very good.
A very positive attitude.
Well,
So it's just about time.
Okay, well, please go ahead.
Michael, if you're ready, shall we? Okay. Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome back to this global seminar series that we are offering through Purdue University and also through CIB. And today, as you've seen in the past seminars, again, today we have a very distinguished speaker with us today, Dr. Michael Lacasse. Let me give a quick introduction to him as I hand over the seminar to him. So Dr. Lacasse is a senior research officer in the Construction Research Center of NRC, having over 30 years experience as a researcher in building technologies and engineering. He joined NRC in 1991 and is currently interim team leader for the low carbon assets through life cycle assessment initiative. He's also project coordinator and a lead researcher within NRC's Infrastructure Canada's Climate Resilience Built Environment Research Program, working on the durability of the building envelope to changing climate loads, the risk to overheating in living and working spaces due to heat extreme events arising from climate change, and updating of building codes and standards to permit adapting building enclosures to a changing climate. Dr. Lacasse is a board member of CIB and coordinator of CIB WAT and TG97. As well, he supports the Standing Committee on Environmental Separation for the National Building Code of Canada and also chairs the ISO Technical Committee on Design Life. With that quick introduction, please welcome Dr. Michael Lacasse.
Thanks very much. Thanks very much, Mark. I really appreciate that. And it's a real pleasure to have an opportunity to talk about nature-based solutions. I'm going to give you a very brief overview of nature-based solutions, and perhaps an invitation to join us in that committee. And just as I attempt to share my screen, okay, if I may share my screen, is it Mr. Stonebreaker that was going to make things easy for me so that I can actually share? I certainly hope so, because otherwise it's going to be somewhat difficult to introduce the topic. So, oh, here we go. Wonderful. Okay, so so now you should see a title slide on my talk, and again, of course, I thank I thank Professor Hustak for the invitation to talk to you, if only very briefly. So we're now bear in mind where I where I work, which is the National Research Council of Canada. This is going to be somewhat Canada-centric, if I can put it that way. If only to try, but by and large, what we're experiencing in Canada is a subset of what's being experienced around the globe in regards to climate change and the effects on our urban agglomerations. And so these elements are not going to be lost on those of you who are in who perhaps come from and live in very large urban agglomerations, wherever they may be around the globe. So we're going to be looking at the phenomena of changing climate. I mean, the implications, I think, for those of you who have been following any of this are straightforward. And we're not going in a direction where we're going to be reducing the risk of heightened temperatures by any means. So what can be done, and what is being done? So from the Canadian perspective, if I may, and I do apologize that I haven't really broadened this talk to beyond our very centric Canadian viewpoint, but the average surface temperature over Canada's landmass, and Canada is considered, as perhaps you may know, a cold climate, has warmed by 1.5 degrees since 1948, twice the global rate, if only because it's in the northern climes, and certain parts of our north have warmed by 2.5 degrees C. So that's quite a bit of warming already. But not only has it been warming, but the annual precipitation has increased over between 1948 and 2012. And well, given the size of the landmass as is Canada, same thing in the United States, as it were, there's strong regional variability in climate change. I mean, that's self-evident. But what do we know about how climate change is going to affect our particular climate and perhaps a good portion of yours? Apart from the sea level rises and increased storm surge and flooding, there'll be an increase in frequency and severity of extreme weather events, floods, heat waves, droughts, extreme winds, and fires. And of course, in your country and in ours as well, we've experienced or are in the process of experiencing these effects over the past years, and they've been quite spectacular in some instances. And so these are just some of the pieces of information that are pertinent to Canada, where we're looking at changes in annual temperature in Canada in relation to over the globe. And as I was saying before, in Canada, the increase is more important. And in the Canadian Arctic, in the northern trend, north of 60 degrees north latitude, all the more so. And so it's, as one can see here, the projected increase in the average annual temperature by 2070 is substantial. We're talking about 4.5 degrees in the far north, albeit not unimportant changes, 2.5 degrees in the southern tip of Canada, where a lot of the urban agglomerations in southwestern Ontario or southeastern Ontario, where a lot of the urban agglomerations in Canada reside. Of course, the temperature rises are not as important in the coastal areas as they are in the interior, as one can see from that graphic. Now, over and above the warming temperatures, of course, there's annual precipitation. And of course, it's rainfall and snowfall. And so we're talking about increases in annual precipitation trends going forward, and decreases in snowfall. So, but of which a good portion of that snowfall will come as rain, no doubt. So because of the increased temperature. So these are some of the items that are going to be an issue. and be an issue in regards to changing the land mass as we go forward. So, and what does all of this climate change lead to? Increases higher stresses on the core public infrastructure, built assets, as it were, a shorter service life of those assets, an increased risk of failure of those assets and loss of functional service over time. And potentially as well, given the increased loads and reduced resistance of this infrastructure, of the built environment, as it were, there's a potential for increased risk to loss of life, increased risk to injuries, increased risk to illnesses due to potential failures, and of course, liability issues that that may arise with the existing codes and standards, which is something that, of course, one needs to address. One needs to affect changes to existing codes and standards so that we can adapt buildings and built assets to and other core public infrastructure to the effects of climate change. Now, this is not lost on you. Insured losses and catastrophic losses in Canada, in the billions of dollars, and the cost of extreme events is quite substantial, and as one can see more recently, since 2005, certainly, there has been an increase in these insured losses, and that's not lost on insurance companies. So, what can be done? Okay, and here the change, as I've attempted to give you a brief overview of what's happening in Canada, but as you well know, these effects are happening across the globe, and it's been widely reported in the United States, issues related to wildfires, drought, and what has one, and not to mention flooding right after the drought. I mean, it's all very worrisome indeed. But in urban centers, what can be done? How can one mitigate the effects of climate change in urban centers? Focusing on nature-based solutions. So one of the things, of course, one can do is increase surface greenery, increase the vegetation that is there. And so here we're talking about elements such as trees and other vegetation that one can put in proximity to the outside of building facades. So you can have green barrier systems or green walls if one wants, that offer a barrier to wind, that offer shading, that help with the mitigation of the effects of warming in proximity to individual buildings, as it were. So you can have trees, green climbing barriers, and different types of greenery coatings, vegetated walls, and what have you. So all sorts of different approaches to mitigating these effects, having vertical greenery on facades. Of course, one can also have greenery on roofs, and you know, from planting trees to having vegetated roof assemblies, as shown here, provided, of course, that the roofing system has been adapted to accept the vegetation. So so that these things need to be brought into practice as one moves forward. Of course, increasing the greenery, it's not simply in North America. Of course, right around the globe, there have been a number of different examples of the use of greenery, be that in the East, in Singapore and China, Malaysia, and these types of more tropical locations, or indeed in subtropical locations elsewhere around the globe. So increasing surface greenery and vegetation is certainly one of the ways in which one can help mitigate by the effects of climate change and increasing temperatures in an urban landscape. Here's an example of tree planting in Montreal that I noticed this past July, where a good number of trees have been planted along the roadways and places where pedestrians might sit and congregate. A series of trees have been planted and just to provide the shade and comfort to those passersby. So it sounds all very common, but there are so many other places and urban landscapes that need to be considered for increased surface greenery. Now, apart from that, of course, increasing surface greenery allows one to cool down the building. You can have, for example, different ways in which the greenery can affect the circulation of air. And green walls affects the airflow and temperature fields around buildings, as you can see here on the right-hand side. One can get well, I mean, and there's various reasons for that. One of it, the surface albedo of buildings, of the cladding of buildings, changes given that there's greenery on it, and so that reduces surface temperatures and thereby, and as well, it depending on the thickness of the greenery, of course, the thermal resistance of the overall assembly can be changed in such a way as to reduce the likelihood of heat buildup in the buildings going forward. Now, trees, of course, can have quite a bit of an effect on the microclimate around buildings, depending on the different types of trees that are used. And of course, the plantings of trees take time to affect buildings. There's no doubt about that. But in any case, they nonetheless can affect the wind flow. And in so doing, affect, of course, the way in which heat affects buildings and what have you. So here is just simply the different images of different trees and the way in which they might otherwise influence airflow around in proximity to those trees. Temperatures, so there are many different tools that are used to get a sense of how the urban agglomerations may change in temperature. Of course, urban canopy models have been developed to understand the atmosphere around the urban agglomerations to get a better idea of what the urban heat island effect is on any different urban center. And of course, the urban heat island occurs because of the mass of different buildings in the urban agglomerations that capture heat and retain the heat, and of course make extreme heat conditions all the more difficult to contend with during extreme heat events. So there's various models can help better understand what different measures, the effect of different measures on the urban canopy, and how temperatures, heat flux, and radiative fluxes affect buildings. And how different features such as bodies of water, trees, and other urban vegetation may otherwise affect individual buildings, communities, or the entire urban agglomeration itself. Increasingly, these models are getting more sophisticated as one goes forward. So then, what is being done about all of the nature-based solutions being put forward? Then just to give you some idea, at the National Research Council, where I work, we've undertaken research initiatives focused on the climate resilient built environment. And we've recently obtained from government sponsors quite a bit of funding, at least quite a bit of funding in our terms, to address issues related to nature-based solutions, so that we can help develop new regulations that will help mitigate the effects of climate change. And so all of this work in support of the climate resilient built environment initiative will hopefully over time develop a culture of building practice that is resilient to climate change and the extreme heat events of climate events that we expect the buildings are going to be subjected to in the future. I think one needs to think in terms of substantive increases in surface temperatures, annual surface temperatures going forward. I don't know that we have made any headway in reducing greenhouse gas emissions to any significant extent that it will make a difference, a great difference in reducing those changes in the future. So I think one needs to focus a great deal more on mitigating the effects of global warming. What we're doing in nature-based solution is looking at nature-based and infrastructure for floods and erosion risks. We're looking at urban flooding and nature-based solutions for commercial roofs, both blue and green roofs. Green roofs being roofs of where there is vegetation, blue roofs being roofs that are capable of collecting and retaining water, so that during extreme rainfall events, one doesn't flood the roadways below with all of the water that falls on roofs that otherwise would be funneled there. And we're also looking at, within urban flooding, evaluating natural flood mitigation measures, the effectiveness of these natural flood mitigation measures, and real-time control of nature-based solutions for urban flood adaptation. In regards to urban heat island, we're looking at preventing building overheating using nature-based solutions and looking at different mitigation strategies. Additionally, we've been involved in collaboration of nature-based solutions for climate resilient buildings and communities through the CIB being the International Council for Research and Innovation in Building and Construction. And this task group number 97 is related to nature-based solutions for climate resilient buildings and communities. It's a new task group that started this past year. And we have with us members that also participate, a good number of Canadian members and a number of members from the United States as well. But they bring with them their own affiliations, including the International Union for Conservation of Nature, and of course, the International Union for Conservation of Nature has its own global standard for nature-based solutions. And so we're bringing that into the, we're bringing awareness of these types of existing standards to practitioners in urban communities. They wouldn't otherwise know about the availability of such information. Now, the Canadian Society of Landscape Architects also has landscape standards and nature-based solutions by design. So we're trying to bring these to the fore in such a way that we can better communicate the availability of such information for different locations around the globe. But of course, because we're from Canada, we have I should say a cold temperature. We're somewhat centered on cold temperature countries, but that doesn't mean that there aren't any other people participating from other countries that aren't involved in our activities. We have the chair in landscape and art and environment from the University of Montreal that's part of our membership, as well as other people that are involved in climate change and ecosystem management in the communities, and also undertake work related to urban sustainability and the environment. So people from Toronto, from Montreal and other parts of Canada. To date, we only have 26 members, but they are from 11 different countries around the globe. The Canadians, I bring to your attention some of the information provided by our members that also participate in the Canadian Society for Landscape Architecture, and offer as well nature-based solutions by design. Here, for example, there are any number of elements that can be made that are a focus of for nature-based solutions related to adaptation of existing urban environments and mitigating the effects of climate change for those urban agglomerations. Our own work program in Task Group 97 relates to sharing information on sharing research on nature-based solutions. We wanted to develop a best practices guideline that would enable professionals, that is to say, practitioners in the domain and policy members, to implement nature-based solutions with confidence in areas of similar climate, as it were. Our first focus being cold temperature climates. Of course, we wanted to develop nature-based solutions and urban green island solutions for carbon neutral, climate resilient buildings. Of course, carbon neutrality is an important consideration as well. Apart from ensuring that one's buildings are climate resilient, one needs to at least make an effort to ensure that the solutions that we're bringing forward take into consideration the carbon footprint of those solutions going forward. As well, we hope to contribute to existing and future nature-based solutions and urban green infrastructure to reduce carbon emissions from buildings and sequester carbon, so that we can moderate the urban microclimate to reduce urban heat island effects. And you do that by, well, it's really with the use of vegetation that one can, number one, sequester carbon, and number two, reduce carbon emissions by virtue of the fact that one would reduce the need for cooling during extreme heat events. This is the way in which. Now, of course, what one needs to do is get an idea of, for any given solution, what are the potential benefits from all of that? What can actually be achieved with a tree, several trees, a tree, a forest, whatever. I mean, these are the types of things that one needs to gather information on, and for which there is some information perhaps, but not so much information. Now, we're undertaking this initiative with a task group on nature-based solutions with my colleagues from Concordia University, Professor Waguet and Professor Leon Wang. Both of which Professor Wang has focused his research on modeling and modeling urban agglomerations, and Professor Gay has focused her research related to looking at nature-based solutions and how those might change the way in which the interior of the building actually responds to climate. And so we hope to develop a state-of-the-art report on nature-based solutions for buildings and communities in the next couple of years. Is where we're already planning. We've already had a few research publications focused, a couple of research publications already focused on this topic. So then, this is just a brief introduction to nature-based solutions. So what do you take from all of this? Clearly, we know what the issues regarding climate change are all about. Increasingly, what we're suggesting is urban communities ought to be developing nature-based solution plans. These being both ecologically sound plans and sustainable solutions so that they can mitigate the effects of climate change, adapt to what are going to be very difficult conditions going forwards. We in both where I work and we will be partnering with academia, industry, and different communities to help bring this about, help develop plans for nature-based solutions with other communities. We've already had partnerships with local communities, be that in Montreal or Ottawa. And of course, we're looking for participation and collaboration from academia. And academia, of course, can help support the studies to demonstrate the viability of implementing these plans. You develop in academia, one can develop the science-based solutions that are necessary to be able to convince others of the necessity to do this type of work. And of course, at the same time, we develop highly qualified personnel to take on the challenges of tomorrow, which is a hugely important endeavor. So then, having said that, I'd like to acknowledge CIB and of course, National Research Council of Canada. And I'd like to say thank you very much for having taken the time to listen to this very brief overview on nature-based solutions for buildings and community. Thank you very much.
Michael, thanks a lot. That is such an important topic, and what you have covered in terms of nature-based solutions and the effect of these solutions on achieving resilience for communities is such an important topic in today's world, given that we are finding more and more climate effects happening around the world that is having a severe impact on the communities and the built environment. So indeed, this is an extremely important topic. And with that said, I have a few questions, but I want to open it for the audience to jump in and ask their questions before I say anything. So let me ask our audience around the world that if they have any questions, to please open their mic and ask the question, please. Yes, we have from Mike Benson. Mike, go ahead, please.
Hi, Mark, and thank you, Michael, for a really good presentation. I'm with actually a PhD student at the University of New Brunswick in Canada, so it's great to see the work in this area here being led by NRCan. Just a question for you, Mike. I mean, it sounds like a lot of the work and a lot of the research with this group is focused on buildings, but will you also be looking at other critical infrastructure systems? I'm thinking energy, transportation, or water, wastewater systems, or is the intent to kind of take lessons learned from the buildings and see how we can apply it to some of these other systems?
Right, well, so it all depends what one was referring to. If you're referring to our initiative in CIB and Task Group 97, this focus is primarily on buildings. If you're referring to buildings within communities, as it were, and how vegetation may otherwise be used to change the way in which the buildings are operated, and so on. So we're trying to mitigate the effects of extreme heat events in buildings in Canada going forward, taking into consideration that extreme heat events are very difficult for northern communities to manage, because people, and in particular elderly people, are not accustomed to, or maybe living in an environment that is such that they might be vulnerable to extreme heat events. If you're talking about what the program of activities at the National Research Council Canada, where I work and in which we're involved related to the built environment, the climate resilient built environment initiative is focused not simply on buildings, but also on infrastructure. And so we're talking about rail infrastructure, we're talking about bridge infrastructure, we're talking about issues related to flooding, and things. So it's broader than simply buildings. There are many different aspects that we're looking at. So I invite you to look at the website for the climate resilient built environment at the National Research Council Canada for additional information on the research program now ongoing.
That's great. Thank you so much.
My pleasure, Mr. Benson.
Thank you. Thank you for that question. Do we have any other questions? Anybody, please either raise your hand or just open your mic and ask a question. A global audience, yes. Ted, please. Professor Widener.
Yes, thank you for the presentation. It's very interesting. It has a tendency to remind me of a portion of passive solar design courses that I took in the 70s. Do you find it relating to passive solar design? And then as another question, how does the urban environment, as it releases heat, not due to the climate, but due to environmental conditions within the constructed infrastructure, how does that affect the overall macroclimate?
Well, indeed. I mean, that's what the urban heat island effect is all about. I'll answer your first question. I'll go back to passive homes in just a minute. But I mean, that's what urban heat island is all about. I mean, the fact that because of urban agglomerations and because of the concentration of buildings that can absorb heat and retain heat, the overall average temperature within the urban agglomeration is higher than the surrounding area around the city itself. And when extreme heat events come about, then you can't really easily cool. That area isn't easily cooled, and it's not, and neither, and even if you have windy periods, if I can say it, put it that way, that they because of the concentration of buildings, they may not easily be cooled simply by the flow of air over the city. And so that in effect brings up the heat island effect, as it were. And so what can one do about it? How do people live more comfortable? How can people more comfortably live in such an environment? They can change surface albedo of the roadways and the buildings, albeit that's a difficult thing to do. But I mean, you can change the amount of vegetation you have. You could develop more additional tree canopies where people walk. And so those are the types of things you can introduce, bodies of water that can absorb heat, so that and you also have a cooling effect from the evaporation of water. But then again, you also have evapotranspiration, and trees themselves give off moisture. And so being beneath their canopy and away from the sun and protecting from the sun makes it more comfortable to move about. So those are the types of things that one foresees going forward for urban agglomerations. Are all urban agglomerations ready to invest in such types of things? I do know that maintaining urban canopies, just as an example of this, on the island of Montreal, the city of Montreal has taken great pains to ensure that its tree canopy is maintained, and all of the adjoining suburbs likewise take great care in maintaining their trees and plant new trees every day. Of course, there's been a blight on hardwood trees in this area for the past several years, and so but nonetheless efforts are being made to help maintain that. Now let's go to your question related to passive homes or passive housing. And is that going to do anything for mitigating the effects of climate change? Well, there's more insulation in a home, and passive homes by and large function on the basis of additional insulation to reduce the amount of energy required to heat and maintain a home, or to maintain the heat in a home. Well, of course, if one has it such that if you have an extreme heat event, is a passive home a good one? Well, let's put it this way. If you have a passive home, you want to ensure that during a extreme heat event, you don't have any, you don't heat the inside of the home whatsoever. You want to ensure that you have shutters on the outside of the windows, and solar heat gain is minimized during that period. Otherwise, it's going to be a bit difficult getting rid of all of the excess heat that might accumulate in the home. So a passive home, and then you want to make sure that you can cool the home down passively, typically opening windows in the evening, where the nighttime temperatures would be presumably lower than the daytime temperatures. But that's about as much as I can talk to in regards to passive homes.
Thank you.
Mr. Wiedner, I hope that addressed both of your questions. I don't know reasonably well, but anyway, I did offer some sort of feedback.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Ted. Thank you, Michael. Any other questions? Well, let me jump in and ask my question then. So, Michael, you mentioned about the role of insurance in part of your presentation, and I was wondering what reinsurance companies or just insurance companies can do in terms of two things. One, more dispersion of the insurance, and second, that what proactive steps do you think insurance companies can do in encouraging nature-based solutions or improving resilience of communities ahead of a disaster?
Well, that's an excellent. I mean, what can insurance, what they can do for the time being? I think the issue with nature-based solutions right now is it's all about cause and effect. To what extent? And so I guess what I'm pointing at is, what don't we know? And what we do know, that generally speaking, if you increase the amount of vegetation, you're likely to get some sort of microclimate effect on an adjacent building. What we don't know for sure is the extent to which that works. If I put this type of this series of trees or vegetation in proximity to the building, what effect will it really have? Of course, that all depends on the type of tree, the building, the latitude and location in which all of that is done. and insurance companies might have interest in underwriting such types of studies going forward. I think in regards to climate change, of course, insurance companies have great interest in understanding how extreme events may otherwise affect their insurance portfolio. If all of your built assets are getting, I should say, otherwise they may be subjected to flooding. They may be subjected to wildfires. They may deteriorate prematurely. It's the type of things that reinsurance companies ought to know what risks they're running for the assets that they're underwriting in the different locations in which they operate. And this is certainly something that perhaps they're doing, but they're only mitigating that by perhaps not offering insurance or increasing the tariffs increasing tariffs. So perhaps there's a better way of doing it, and that is knowing what risks they're actually running, and that's certainly something that the CIB could help them with.
Thank you, Michael. Appreciate that. Any other questions? Yes, we have from Professor Graff. Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, hello. So thinking back at that sort of that interface of things like insurance, but also regulations. I'm coming mostly from sort of a building design perspective. That this idea of integrating new systems. I'm thinking things along the lines of the vegetated walls, green roofs, things like that. Historically, there's been a lag in terms of sort of adoption of such systems, retaining water, having more moisture enclosed in, the actual physical content of building enclosures is something that you're working against, working to avoid. And obviously there are ways to achieve that successfully, but there's sort of a historic, reticence to necessarily be introducing things when you don't have to. And so I was just wondering if you might comment some on how those sort of things we may be doing at the local level or at the individual project level work with these larger, more sort of universal systems, regulation, insurance, and how that obviously then combines at the aggregate to the urban environment as a whole, and in getting that benefit out there. Is there progress there that you see?
There is very little progress, and I don't know. And so, in fact, engaging insurance companies in developing demonstration projects would be a very useful thing to do indeed. Where, for example, they might underwrite the development of a blue roof,
Sure.
a green roof, or green vegetation, and such that the designer would choose the components and that would minimize, I should say, negative effects on the rest of the envelope. But one would embrace the positive contributions to vegetation on the building. Take into consideration that this has been done elsewhere. I mean, if you would ask where in God's name is there a blue roof been built? Strangely enough, blue roofs have been put together in Norway, but it isn't so strange, if only because they've experienced in the past few years an increase in precipitation such that blue roofs are increasingly making sense, so that they can reduce the amount of water outflow to the urban streets from the roofs that collect a lot of water. The idea is to retard the flow of water from these roofs to the roadways. So these are the types of things that can be done, but I think what one needs to do is develop demonstration projects so that the insurance with insurance companies, so that they themselves can be convinced that one can actually design and achieve the necessary performance over time that practitioners suggest that they might be able to do. So I think this is one of the ways of being able to do it. And Professor Graff, thanks for bringing that up. I appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Jeff. Any other questions? We have a few minutes for a couple of questions, if anybody has questions. Our domestic students, global audience. All right, while you're thinking of your question, let me throw in my questions. So Michael, as a follow-up to what Jeff was talking about, and I think Ted had mentioned earlier also, is, how do we maintain this balance between development and also, nature-based solutions? And I'm thinking about, the artificial levees that were built in New Orleans, for instance, that carried salt water and destroyed the mangroves, and that could have prevented some of the flooding that happened during Katrina. So, how do we? What are your thoughts on maintaining this balance between progress? Well, maybe that's not the right word, but between artificial solutions and nature-based solutions. Let's put it that way.
Well, okay. So, I mean, it's what types of tools do we have to be able to evaluate the solutions prior to their actually being put in place and implemented? I mean, this is what one needs to ask oneself. It's why, for example, that modeling is so very important for us, because being able to model things and infer from the results what is likely to occur is really the way in which we hope to gain some traction on showing people that nature-based solutions are viable and can offer the types of adaptation and mitigation that one anticipates they can do going forward, given the effects of climate change. So, so that's why, for example, we have within nature-based solutions, we have a group from Concordia University that we're working with that has as a basis of what they do modeling, and we hope to be able to, well, not only model things but also benchmark the modeling results. So there's two things to modeling. There's the actual modeling portion of it. Can you model this? Can you model that? And can I actually ensure that what I'm modeling actually occurs? So I need to be able to go out in nature and benchmark the results, and from that, add those two together and convince ourselves that the models are working adequately. So I think that's the approach that one needs to take.
Thank you, Michael. We have just about 30 seconds left. If anybody has a pressing question to ask Dr. Lacasse. Anybody, please raise your hand, just open your mic and ask your question. Well, if not, Dr. Lacasse, I have one final question to ask of you. This is such an interesting topic, and I really appreciate you taking time to address that. And that is that, in your presentation, you were showing about the greenhouse effect and what was happening with larger cities. And I was wondering that, how can nature-based solutions impact the smog situation in many of the larger cities that we see around the world? Your thoughts, please.
Are you asking whether or not well, we know, for example, that vegetation helps reduce, can potentially reduce smog effects. To what extent, I have no idea to what extent that is or isn't evident. I mean, I can't answer that question really thoughtfully, Mark. I apologize.
No, thank you. I mean, I didn't mean to put you on spot there, but I mean, this is indeed such a complex question, complex area, really, that many solutions are needed. And I truly appreciate all the work that your task group is doing in this, and you yourself are doing. And I see that Ted has a question coming up. So let me hand it over to him quickly. Ted, please.
As a follow-up to the question about pollution reduction, is that an appropriate area for future study?
Well, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, in other words, are there commitment effects of nature-based solutions? can it, for example, actually reduce the amount of smog and pollution in an urban center? And if so, to what extent? I mean, that's an excellent question. We need to get environmentalists involved to the extent that they can actually make measurements of that. And I don't expect that would be too difficult to do.
Sounds like a great opportunity.
I quite agree. That's the fun, and that's why it's so very exciting to talk about this, because there's many other aspects of it that, of course, for myself, I hadn't thought about, but others, as we share information on this platform, it's a highly useful thing to do, if only because we have different ideas coming in that perhaps we can exploit going forward. So thank you very much for the opportunity, Mark. I really appreciate it.
No, thanks a lot. I want to ask Don, do you have any, Mr. Don Ward, any final word before we close?
Yes, thank you, Michael. Great presentation as always. And I feel, and Ted's question, I think, showed this as well. I feel you've demonstrated what the value is for a global group of researchers to come together in this way, you know, to share knowledge and ideas and to collaborate. And I know it's early days for you, but you know, are you expecting to be able physically to bring some of the team together, perhaps for a conference in 2023 or 2024?
We have an opportunity for people to at least publish in 2 conferences going forward, both underwritten by the CIB. One of them is the environmental conference that's going to, well, I'll provide information on these 2 conferences, Mark, in a follow-up email, I guess. One of them is the durability of building materials conference is going to be held in Beijing in October of this year. The other one is the SEAS 2023 conference that's going to be held in Portugal, in Funchal, Portugal, in June this year. Both of them have opportunities for people to publish related to nature-based solutions. So I will give you some coordinates after this for those who are thinking in terms of perhaps attending these, that perhaps they might have interest in writing about nature-based solutions.
Dr. Lacasse, I want to thank you again. This has been an excellent presentation. Thank you for the seminar. And I also want to thank our domestic audience as well as global audience for participating and listening into this very exciting seminar, as I mentioned before. So again, let's give Dr. Lacasse a big round of applause. You know, either open your mic or virtual way, whichever way it works. But truly appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Ward. Thank you very much.
Over and out. Thanks.
All the best. Take care.
Bye.
Thanks very much.
I see that everybody is signing off, putting in their thank yous. Excellent.
Yeah, thanks very much, Mark. That was great. That was lots of fun.
No, I appreciate it. I was actually on my way on the road, so I'm parked on the side of the road here.
Never a dull moment for you. Oh my God.
Never a dull moment. No.
God. The man is on the move, I must say.
But it works. Yeah.
That is exactly the way it works, and I do wish you well. Now, and be careful driving.
No, I'm standing on the side, so I'm not driving.
Take care, Mark.
Yeah, thanks. Bye.
Thanks to Mr. Stonebreaker.
Yeah, thanks.
Hey, you're very welcome. Thanks for coming.